Love it. We're talking today for the backyard adventure about how to make soap. I'm going to give you my third favorite recipe, one of my favorite smells in the world, as we talk about soap, how to make it, an overview, and just all sorts of tips along the way. So check out today's video. As we begin today's video, we're going to be looking at soap making, and this is actually going to be a three-part series where I'm going to go through and talk about my three favorite recipes and kind of walk through some different techniques, some different tips, some different tools you'll use along the way. Each video I'll focus on not only the recipe of what that soap is, but also each one I'll kind of focus on different parts, so whether it's the tools or the techniques or things like that. So put them all together, you should have a pretty good idea of how to make soap and just some different things to think through if you're going to try this at home. So definitely is a fun one, similar to my statue making videos. This is one of those that for a number of years I would make soaps and give them away as gifts, you know, Christmas gifts, housewarming gifts. Sold them at craft fairs for a couple of years, had a lot of fun with that, and make them around the house a lot. In fact, my wife, she likes to go out and buy those soaps, the natural soaps that have, you know, all the good stuff in it, and she kind of threatens me and says, either we can buy them at the store or you can make them now. And so we're running out at the house. It's time to make some soaps. So that's the plan. A couple things you're going to need in general just for soap making. So you want to have some different glass bowls. Ceramic bowls is fine. You want to have your you know, some spatulas, some mixing tools, paper towels. I like to have some smaller glass bowls so I can pre-measure the ingredients and kind of have everything ready to go when it's time. An electric hand mixer, I would say, is essential. You're going to want to have a scale that has you know, digital readout, exact reading for grams or ounces depending on what you're using with your recipe. And then you're going to need a thermometer. Some people use meat thermometers. I like this digital laser one. It typically does a real good job of giving me the exact reading. You're going to need that for your soap. And then a few things I have here behind me. When I did my craft fairs, I had my little natural soap sign that went along with my statues. Did that for a few years. You don't need that. But for this recipe we're going to be doing, it's a pretty standard recipe, pretty similar to probably a lot of the ones out there with these two main ingredients. And that is coconut oil and olive oil. So the olive oil is amazing for what it does to your skin. The coconut oil helps give it not only some of the firmness, but also some of the lathering effect as you're washing. And there's other things that are kind of standard ones you could go with. Palm oil can be a good one, but there's some concerns about some of the environmental impact with where it is, how they get it. So again, there's a lot of oils out there, a lot of different techniques to dive into, but as far as today, we're going to be focusing on these two oils. You need lye. This is just a foundational ingredient for your soap making. It's also called sodium hydroxide. And you want to make sure when you do get this that it is a food grade. It'll typically say food grade or something very similar to that on there. I haven't seen it, but there are other types out there that you wouldn't necessarily want to use for that. It might be used for plumbing or other things, but just look for the food grade part. And this is the stuff that is somewhat, I guess you could say, toxic. When you're first making the soap, it quickly becomes a non-issue as you go through the process, but there's a step along the way where you need the good air circulation. You don't want it touching your hand. You don't want to get it into your eyes, breathing it, that sort of thing. So that's where it's good to be outside. It's really not that scary or anything, but just something to be aware of. So you need that. Essential oils is another one. So there's that's really what I do is I have my soap recipe. Actually, I have probably 2 or 3 soap recipes that are kind of go-to, and then I just change the essential oils and then some of the other things that I might add in, like oatmeal or activated charcoal, things like that. So for this third favorite recipe, which is the one for today, I'm going to be doing it's kind of a unique combination that somewhere I heard about it years ago. And that is cedarwood and lime. So I've got cedarwood and lime essential oils. You put them together, kind of a 50-50 mix, and it is amazing. So excuse the jet flying over. I guess that's how it goes today. All right, so those are some of the basics. You are going to need a soap mold also. On my next video, I'm going to talk about different types of soap molds you can use. But just kind of a standard go-to one when you go to soap making supply places is you get a silicone mold and usually a cheap wood box you can put it in, and this is just easy for taking the loaf of soap out when you're done. You can cut it up into your squares, so having some of these is great. There's also this pink one, and I got this years back. It's nice. I actually use this as kind of my overflow, so when I'm making soaps and I have a little bit extra, not enough for a full loaf, I'll make, you know, whether it's 2, 3, or whatever, but I'll have this to kind of so I don't have any waste. And so I don't like this as much because as you're trying to pop it out, sometimes you'll damage the corners or just kind of cause some defects. I like to have the loaf that I can just cut up, but I always have one of these extra for overflow, so that's important for that. And I think we're pretty well ready to go. Again, as we go through this, if questions pop up, or even if you've got some ideas from experiences you've had with this, throw it in the comments. It's helpful for me, it's helpful for others, and I'll try to get back to those questions as soon as possible, within a couple days. If not that day, I'll try to keep on top of those. But it's not a difficult thing, it's pretty fun, and the end result is amazing. So before I measure the ingredients, I do want to show you kind of what we're looking at making. So this is a version of the cedarwood lime where you basically, I've taken some different ground up stone. It's a mica powder that's green. And I took some of that, mixed it in. I've taken some without it, and so I've got kind of a two-tone marble effect. And this is a different soap mold I used, but made kind of this rectangular soap. And so this is essentially what we're going to be going for, is something like this. All right, let's dive into some of the ingredients, and I'll kind of zoom in, show you what I'm doing here, and then we'll put this all together. For the lye, or the sodium hydroxide, so there's different versions you can get, but again, I got the food grade. And so for this recipe, I need 8.3 ounces. And so you want to be cautious, either use rubber gloves or make sure you're not mixing this with water. I'm going for 8.3 exactly. So I'm going to set that aside and be ready to go with the lye. So for the oils, I have this large glass jar that I can heat the oils up and do a lot of the preparation. And sometimes when I have a bunch of different things and I'm moving it around, the residue left on one can mess up my measurement. So I like to have it as exact as possible. So I put this on here, and then I got to clear the scale. And again, I'm using ounces. So for this one, I'm going for 20.3 ounces of the coconut oil. So I've got my coconut oil, and I've actually got a little bit left over from an old container that I just kind of warmed up, and it's already in liquid form. So I'm gonna drop that in right now. Now, coconut oil, it's got a higher, it takes a higher temperature for it to soften up. So I'll put it in the microwave in just a moment at kind of a 50% power. I would say 20.3. So I take a spoon and just kind of scoop in chunks of it. All right, so a little trick I do with this is when I have my oils, I typically put the oils all in the same jar. And so what I'm gonna do is I've got this here, and then in a moment I'm gonna put the olive oil in here, and I'll just hit the tare button, get it kind of reset to 0, and then put in the amount of olive oil I need in that. And then if I'm using castor oil or palm oil or anything else, I'll do that same thing. But before I put the olive oil in here, I want to kind of bring this down. So I'm gonna put this in the microwave a little bit, let this kind of start to melt down, and then I'll come back in and put the olive oil in here. All right, so I've got this up to 35.7 ounces of the olive oil, and then I've got my coconut oil in there. So before I warm this up, so what I'm aiming for is I wanna get this to 120 degrees at the same time that my water and lye are 120 degrees. So I'm gonna warm this up while the water and lye are cooling down to 120, kind of walk you through that process. So, okay, so as far as the water, we're gonna be going for, so we're going for 20.7 ounces of the water. And so with the water, you wanna use distilled water. You don't wanna just use your tap water. And so let's see if I can get my 20.7 ounces. So these are 1 ounce little jars I get these in, so I don't actually have to pre-measure these. I just go ahead and take these off when I'm ready to pour them in, and there's a little stopper, let me show you. And you need to take that stopper out so you can pour this in. You're not looking for a drip, you're looking to pour this whole thing in. So I don't know if I can get this without a, yeah, there it goes. So you just pop that off, and I've got 1 ounce of the essential oil in there ready to go. So I'll have the jars open, ready to go, but not necessarily measure those out in anything different. So basically what's gonna happen is I'm gonna put the water in here, and then I'm gonna add the lye. Now, water goes first. I'm gonna make sure I get as close to exact as possible, so I get every possible drip out of there. And then when I put this lye in, the moment this lye hits this, now lye is I'm not sure the whole chemistry of it, but in the old days they used to take, I think it was the ash from your fireplace, and they found a way to make it. So look that up online. That's a question for somebody else. But the moment this hits the water, a chemical reaction begins to happen where this water heats up super, super hot, and the fumes and what it can, I guess what it can do to your eyes. I haven't experienced it because I back off, or I make sure I'm in a well-circulated area. But I'm gonna put this in there, and then I'm gonna take my my metal thing, and I'm gonna go ahead and stir this up in there, get it just so it's kind of all dissolved, and then this is gonna have to sit, and it's probably gonna take, depending on the temperature out here, it's gonna take 15-20 minutes for this thing to cool down, and I'm just gonna continually check it. I'll swirl around a little bit, but I want to make sure this thing goes down to 120 degrees. At the same time, I want this down to 120 degrees, and so I don't want it above that when these two go together. I want them at the same temperature for when I'm mixing the soaps. I don't know if you can see the steam coming up. This is now mixed and just sitting here, so you can see 186, and this is going to start decreasing over the next 15-20 minutes. So I'll keep watching that. I might come back in here and just stir it a little bit, but it's always fun, a fun science experiment to take the kids and have them go ahead and feel it. Like underneath, it's nice and hot. It'll burn you if you keep your hand on there, but it's kind of fascinating chemistry, physics. I don't know, what is that? All right, yeah, you can see now it's 172, and because this thing is going to now retain some of that heat, it's going to slow down on its drop, but initially it cools down a bit. I've even put this in the freezer before. I had an empty freezer once, and it was pointless. Just let it sit there for a little bit. So come back in a moment and check it again. All right, so while this is cooling down, I'm going to go ahead and take this and slowly heat it up to 120 degrees. I can go slightly over that and then let it cool down, but this will lose its temperature slower than this will. So I want to make sure I don't go too hot and then have this thing hot while this thing is cool, because I can't rewarm this back up. So I'm going to go over to the microwave, have it on 50% power, let this, I'll put it in for 45 seconds or so, a minute at a time, stir it up. I'll come back in a moment. We'll keep checking this temperature, try to get these two matched up, and then we'll do our soap making. All right, 119, and this is 120. So they're both right at the same spot, which is perfect. We're ready to mix. All right, so I'm going to pour at this point the fumes are not bad, like it was earlier. So I'm going to pour this into here. You're going to see it kind of fogs up. And I'm going to be blending this till it gets to what's called a trace, and that's where it's kind of a thick, almost like a lemon meringue pie kind of looking jelly. So it doesn't take very long, and I've got my other ingredients ready to go. So I just mix it down here so it doesn't splatter. And as I go through this, it's going to start hardening up in a moment, and I'm kind of getting that milky look. And then I'm going to take half of it and put it in another container so I can color half and leave half of it kind of that yellowish white. And then when this starts thickening up, I'm going to go ahead and put the essential oils in at that point, and then separate these. And then at that point, I'll put in my colorant, which is a fine kind of mica powder, and possibly I'm going to use the activated charcoal for this one. Okay, so I'm just starting to feel it's starting to harden up a little bit like a pudding. It's not quite at trace, but I'm going to go ahead and put the essential oil in here and get that mixed in just a moment. I want to get that mixed in before this thing really fully hardens up. Okay, so I got, you don't want to put any more than 2 ounces of total essential oil. This is probably even maybe a little high on the end, but I really like that strong smell. So trace is when you start getting that little bit of a, you can kind of see the ripples in there, so it's kind of thick. Watch out, watch what it does. Yeah, you can kind of see it leaves the ripples, so that's now at a trace. And at this point, I actually like to separate it and put it in 2 different things so I can have 2 different colors and make that marble effect. So I'm gonna pour some of that in there. It's not an exact thing, it's more of an art. All right. And then with this, I'm gonna go ahead and start putting this in. This is more for color, and so it's kind of up to taste. So I'm gonna see how this looks as I put a little bit in there. And as it gets more trace, it's harder to mix, so I can't do this for very long. So you can see I'll have kind of a green and white mixed together. All right. So I always use 2 spatulas, 1 for each color, so I don't have the white getting mixed in when I'm not ready for it to be. I want to preserve as much as possible, so I get as much as I can off of that. Just do one more quick. Scrape the sides, make sure I have the bulk of that mixed in together, so you can see that's good to go. This is okay. Take our mold, and I'm gonna explain this later, but this is not enough. I'll need more than this. So I've got some extra molds I'm gonna put this stuff in, but this is what I'm doing here for the video. So what I like to do is I kind of put a little blob in at the bottom, and then I'm gonna come back, put in some white, and I kind of layer it, and by the time this thing is all done, it's got a real cool effect. You can see it gets a little heavier on the white there. And then I'll go a little heavier on the green. And I don't necessarily want to fully mix these together, but I want to get the air bubbles out, so I'm gonna tap that. Do another layer of white. This I'll just do kind of little blobs of it in there. And you don't want to get this on your skin. Get it on your skin and it'll start to burn. So if you do get it on your skin, wash it off pretty quick. Which is why I'm still using the rubber gloves. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of massage it a little bit. Make sure I got all the soap going out to the edges. So there's no air bubbles. A mold like this, there's some similarities to my concrete statues. If you haven't seen the concrete statue videos, go back and check those out. Whatever this top is, this is what it's going to dry at, and it'll be kind of like concrete. It'll harden up into that nice loaf. So at the very end, I go through and I put a piece of parchment paper on top and just kind of lightly go over this, make sure it's a nice flat surface, because I'm not keeping anything on this part. And then I'll put a board over it and bring this in the house, keep it on the counter for the time while it's curing here. Alright, so the soaps have now been sitting for 24 hours, so let me just kind of take you through what we have here. This is the mold I'm kind of focusing on today, and I always keep a board and towel over it just to let it kind of insulate a bit while it's resting overnight. But what you can see here is I take this apart. I've got my silicone mold, and so just pops out pretty easy. These things are fabulous. really easy to use. And the lime comes out real strong. It's that cedarwood lime smell is just awesome. I love it. And then what I like to do here is just kind of gently open this up. It's very similar to my concrete statue stuff. Maybe I could make a concrete statue of a soap mold. That would not be interesting. Okay, so you can see here. All right, so you can see here what we have. As far as cutting, there are real nice soap cutters you can make or buy. I typically use a nice sharp large knife, or I've used this kind of scraper and kind of just cut my block. So I'm going to go ahead and use the knife method and just show you how I do that. So I typically like to go for about a 1-inch block and just go down, and it's super soft, almost like butter. Just slice it down. Let me just show you what that thing looks like. So you can see the kind of the cool features by mixing it together like we did. And then I'll take these and I just put them on a drying rack. And I'm going to actually let these things sit for a week to 2 weeks before I package them up. So that's the gist of how we make the soaps. Now, a couple things about this. This is the third best recipe I have, and this is the cedarwood lime. I love it. Pretty simple recipe as far as the coconut oil and the olive oil. It's got a nice smooth texture. In fact, just a little while ago I had a little blob of it that was kind of my scrapings, and I took that and I've already started washing my hands with this blob. It smells and feels so good. I've washed my hands like I think 6 times. About an hour ago I was doing some dishes and I stopped and then I washed my hand. I just kept washing my hand. Like, this just feels so good. So pretty cool stuff to deal with. I got a couple other videos. You're going to see one coming up soon. It'll be my second best recipe. I'm not going to tell you what that is. And then finally the grand finale, my favorite recipe. Got a couple others I like too, so I'll mention those along the way. The next video will have some tips on molds, some different strategies on how to mold the soap up and what that will look like. So I've got a couple different strategies with that. I've got some tools, some tips along the way. So keep tuned in for that. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more things like this. And please put some comments down below if you have any ideas, thoughts, questions. That'd be helpful. But hopefully this has been interesting at least. Try it out. And if you're one of my friends, maybe I'll let you try my soap sometime. Anyway, have a good life.